This is RegCast, your edge on RegTech, risk, and regulatory transformation. Hosted by RegTech pioneer PJ DiGiamarino, RegCast delivers regulatory clarity, AI precision, and market trust with expert insights from the front lines. From MiFID III to AI, we connect regulation to execution, charting the path to credible compliance before gaps become capital or reputational risks. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or at regrisklegalsolutions.com and stay ahead of the regulatory curve. PJ DiGiamarino is one of the original architects of RegTech. With a career spanning Barclays, McKinsey, and his pioneering work at JWG Group, PJ has spent the last 20 years helping regulators and financial institutions decode complexity and transform compliance into competitive advantage. Now, as CEO of RegRisk Legal Solutions, he's at the forefront of AI-enabled regulatory intelligence.
Hello and welcome to RegCast. In Season 7, we're looking into the whole new set of supervisory requirements that focuses on evidence. And really this evidence is key to the future of AI control. Today, the pressure point we're looking at is the reporting system itself. And there's a lot of pressure on it right now. Just this month, the industry recommendations have come out from the EBA and the ECB, something called the JCRB. I'm sure we'll hear about more in a minute. But they've made very important semantic recommendations for what they would like to focus on. ESMA has also this month updated its data strategy, which is it came out a couple of years ago and runs to 2028. So it gives you a sense of that's currently in play. And then there's another UK Dear CEO letter this month that flags specifically data risk. So this is the first time in a decade where I'm finally seeing semantics being treated as build work rather than conference talk. And we're finally seeing the reporting agenda move from 10 years of intent to actually build. And in future events like what the discussion paper in the UK will bring us this quarter, what happens with the US Financial Data Transparency Act, really make one thing clear. Semantics no longer an academic debate. It's now on the delivery path, and there's a real prize. Right? It's not just one single regime that we're talking about. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of data points that need to be aggregated and looked at to make sense in a very complicated system. And they get aggregated and they get reported top down. And that's really the confluence that we're looking at today in this episode. Now, we're joined by two experts on either side of the public-private debate. First, Remigio Echeverria is a deputy director for statistics at the ECB. I'll let him introduce more about his background and his perspective in a second. And then Stephanie Rubishevsky, who's the chief product officer at Novartis, who's had a long career in the markets and now has also spent plenty of time on the transformation that underlies RegTech. Thank you both for joining us. Remy, could I please ask you to do a quick introduction?
Yes, of course, Brigitte. Thank you very much for having me the opportunity to contribute to your initiative. Yes, I'm Deputy Director General here in Statistics at the ECB, 25 years of experience working with data reporting in the various phases. In the earlier times, more on aggregate reporting. In the more recent times, also because of the recent crisis we have observed in the markets, plus the supervisory responsibilities joining to the ECB, entering more in the world of what we call granular data or microdata. And this, of course, these two worlds are now claiming, I would say also from my talks to the industry, to a way to have to organize the data reporting in a manner that, of course, provides the authorities the data they need for the use, but of course that we collect this into the most, if I would call it, intelligent manner, so that it's less costly for the reporting agents, for the banks mainly here, to report information to us, so that we can speak closer to the language the information is in the bank, so that for them it's less costly to send to us, but at the same time that we have the information we need to run our policies. That's, I think, the challenge we had ahead, and there's full commitment from the ECB to look at that.
And all right, well, thanks so much, PJ, and thanks, Mary, for having me here today. Very excited to be part of your podcast. Hopefully next time I'll bring my own microphone. But just to give a bit of background about myself, I'm Stephanie Brzezowski. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Novartis. I have about just over 20 years of experience in capital markets, with probably about the last 18 in reg, kind of thrown in the deep end, having been a trading assistant on the credit desk at Morgan Stanley. Quickly had to help them figure out how they could continue to trade those instruments with the implementation of mandatory clearing, compression, self-execution, dealing with all of the credit events that happened at that time. Moved on to spend some time at HSBC to help build out their OTC client clearing product offering, and then spent some time at DWA, where we took regulatory text and put it into machine-readable format to really help firms understand whether or not they had any regulatory obligations. And I managed the entire transaction reporting mandate, as we called it then. Spent a few years consulting for DTC's Report Hub as a product owner, really saw them through the CFTC rewrite, EMIR refit, and product enhancements. And I finally joined Novartis just under 2 years ago to run the Enact platform, where our main focus is on quality assurance and reconciliations for transaction reporting. So again, we really look at all of those data quality, high standards. How can we make sure that what you've reported is correct? So that's great, your schema is valid, but does it make sense what you're sending to the regulators? Do they have that data you need? Have you interpreted the regulations correctly? And kind of everything that we're going to talk about today. So looking forward to our discussion.
Well, thank you both, and thank you for giving a bit of perspective. I think it's important to understand how this all fits together, because that's really the heart of semantics, and that's what we're talking about is getting different languages from either side of a trade or a risk calculation to be able to understand each other. We're not talking about blessing code. I don't think we're talking about let's have the regulators give us code to run on our systems. That's just I think a non-starter. But we are talking about shared logic, right? And understanding when Stephanie says she's talking about clearing, what that means to Remy, right? I think ultimately this is one of the core messages, that these rules were never really designed to become code in the first place, but you can take out the semantic ambiguity, and there's too much vagueness in the way we define these requirements today. So when we talk about simplification, it's very difficult because no one really understands, well, what is it that we were really precisely getting at in the first place? So this retranslation and this disambiguation effort really is, in my mind, one of the root causes of the problem, because the rule books were never written to be run as code. And so ultimately, the transformation we're talking about tries to get to semantics as a bridge, and help to define that meaning that takes a common domain model, or the banking industry reference dictionary known as the BIRD, or the DRR code to really help with all that interpretations. So really, it's about blessing the outcomes from these models. And I think that's where the AI hook is for me. And, I think the big thing everyone wants to know is, how do I get the value out of the AI? Well, the answer is in helping to understand what the problems are in the first place, and in making sure that that what you're reporting looks good, and that if there are any issues, that you're able to work out with your interpretation, that you were representing a version of what you thought was truth. So the window to get this right is coming on us fast. So I'd like to start the questions really around this. How do we make regulatory meaning executable and provable across these regimes? Starting with templates. So Remy, what do the templates serve a purpose for today, and really what are they trying to achieve, and what's really the regulated artifact that we're struggling with in 2026?
Thank you, PG. So to my understanding, I think that templates, or at least what we have in mind when we design here templates, is to have a direct replication of what the user needs. The user meaning the ultimate supervisor, the monetary policy analyst, so that the information is already in the way he would like to see it, analyze it, to take the decisions. So this has some major drawbacks, because, of course, the interpretation and the transformation between the information, the granular information as is in the bank systems, to the aggregate concepts that are reflected in a template, as you just explained in a minute ago, it's difficult and can be done different by the different banks. Then you have problems of quality. This is also time consuming. This is very costly for you, because whenever we want some additional information in the template, a new breakdown, a new attribute, then of course means that the bank has to re-engineer all the thing to produce this additional table. And this also then requires also questions on our side because we don't understand how the information has been filled out. It's all complicated. To the opposite, granular data or collecting granular data, which we started at the ECB, for example, to do that about 7 years ago, more or less, following a bit what we observed in the financial crisis. We have observed that the transformation are closer to the information the way the banks have stored it in the database. And then, of course, there's reduced cost of reporting and also increases quality. And then the templates as such, as forms of what the users would like to see or how they want to have the information organized to take their decisions, can be easily filled by us, by the authorities in order to meet their needs. Also, of course, if you collect more granular information, you then avoid these problems of having to constantly have to amend the templates whenever some additional information is needed. If you collect the very much granular data points, you have your huge database in-house, and then if the user wants an additional breakdown, wants another country in the information, whatever, you don't need to ask changes to the reporting agent. You just simply organize from the big database that you have the information in a manner. And of course, for supervisors is also very often the challenge, oh yes, but if you collect granular information, still some of the, capital ratios, KPIs, those the bank might take responsibility on reporting that directly because, of course, risk-weighted assets, the policies they have to evaluate their own risk may be different by bank, and the authority may not know exactly per bank how to do the different aggregation. Of course, this doesn't exclude that whether you go a bit more granular reporting, you need still to have to collect some, let's call it KPIs or high-level aggregates in order to fulfill a bit this more maybe administrative uses. But of course, the idea is to move out from this, let's say, old system of template-based reporting, which has worked maybe, I would say, nicely until 2008, 2010, before the financial crisis, to the idea of collect more granular information using logical data model. Logical data models as a way of translating more to the language of the information that is in the banks, how we want to get the data reported to us. And then the transformations to the template-based reporting or to the templates that the user needs can be done more centrally or according to even rules agreed even with the industry. So that's, I think, where we are heading at, and I think we should really embark in this journey. And this is a bit about what I would understood as simplification. Simplification can be also seen as, okay, let's check how many templates we have now and let's reduce to half because this we don't need, this is superfluous, this is that. But that's a very simple way of understanding simplification. For me, simplification is to collect better so that we have the information we need in the less costly manner.
I think just to add to that a bit, and you've hit on some interesting points there. I mean, I think from the template side and the point you made around how the banks all store their data and all of their many different systems makes that interpretation, that transformation layer really important. And one of the ethos of our platform when we're working with our clients to provide that transparency into how we've transformed their data, how we've interpreted their data against the regulatory text, what needs to go into those templates that need to get reported. We see a lot of issues today where firms try to meet the obligations, the regulatory obligations, and we have some clients that have global obligations. So, it just compiles the amount of effort and interpretation that needs to go into that, really around how you need to get those data into those standards. And the more templates that you have and the less you understand your data and the more you have all these bifurcated systems really makes that much harder to accomplish. I think that's one of the points that we want to discuss is around having some of these standardized models. And how do you get all of this data from upstream into one place where you can create those transformations and have that transparency and make sure, yes, you've completed this template the regulator is asking for. Does it make sense what's going in there? Like, have you just ticked the box? Yes, it's correct. The format's correct. Am I taking the right information from upstream? How do I make sure that what I'm reporting is consistent to each one of the regulators? We've had this large period of change over the past couple of years, and I think we're going to continue to see that. And I think a lot of those initial implementations were around, yes, let me just meet that template. Let me make sure that the regulators can receive all of my data, and that's great. I think we're now seeing a lot of those reporting entities, those firms, the obligations, take a step back and look at their controls, say, how have I managed my data? We see a lot of data projects embarking right now to make sure, yes, we're meeting the regulation, but that's great. I can fit these templates, but what does my data model look like, and how do I interpret that and transform to all that? So I think this is kind of what we're going to see happening for the next couple of years now.
And I guess a question for both of you, but maybe starting with Stephanie. Talk a bit more about what it takes to go upstream to the business and get them to understand the language of their asset class. Let's think of swap, currency swap. Which one's currency pair one and which one's currency
exactly.
Pair two? How do you make that translation, and what role do these new standard artifacts help play?
It's a really interesting point, because we've seen a lot of firms or clients that have taken legacy systems that maybe were meant for one purpose, and now you need to extract all of this transaction reporting data out of there. And does it make sense anymore for these types of products that we want to trade? Are there different ways in which we need to order the currencies? What is the price? Do I need to include accrued interest? There's all of these interpretations. You might not have all of that directly from upstream. So do you need to look at any other enrichments or other ways you need to transform that? Do you want to be using a data lake where you're able to apply all of this type of logic depending on what that product is, what the asset class is, what that particular product is? What was this system meant for? And I think we're seeing a lot now of a lot of clients or firms looking at their architecture as a whole. Is this still fit for purpose? Do I need to upgrade? Do I need to get different formats? Am I relying on a vendor? Does it mean I need to go ask them to give me this new information so that I can extract the correct economic details of this transaction and make sure it gets reported correctly to the regulators? Do I want to start to look at building my own internal systems? So I think there's still, a lot of room for interpretation, especially when we're trying to take systems that were meant for one purpose, extract data that's meant for another purpose. Where do you apply that transformation? This is why it's also really important that you have those reconciliations between all of those different touch points. So between A to B, B to C, what did I expect to happen from here? What was that transformation? Did the number of records come down? Was that correct? It's really important you have that data lineage all the way through, and where you can apply these standard transformations or standard industry models. And I know we're going to touch on CDM and DRR and potential, other globally recognized models. That's where those also become really important, is to make sure that those common interpretations are also leveraged.
Remy, what's your view?
Yeah, well, if it's very much agreeing to what Stephanie said, I think that this, maybe on the data lineaging, I think this is quite important. I mean, this idea of how to transform and interpret this information call us for, I think, the important you mentioned before about semantics and data dictionary. I would say semantics is important because, of course, first the authorities themselves need to clarify what we define in the different templates or in the different regulations, what we mean. Very often we use different words for the same concept, or apparently the same word for different concepts, or slightly different requirements for information which is hardly to understand why this was requested in two different manners. I don't know, non-performing loans 30 to 45 days. Well, cannot the authorities define it is 30 or 45 days and just have one collection of that? Alternatively, if you say, no, we have these two interpretations, then it's important that we define how we can make it easier for the banks to report maybe the granular information, so that then we can aggregate the information as to for 30 days if your institution is looking at 30 days non-performing loans, or 45 days if you want or your users want to look at this concept. So in that sense, I think to improve lineage for having more quality and also comparability across the frameworks, the jurisdictions, it's very important that everyone in the reporting process understand how the user requirements are translated into these reporting requirements and how it can be sourced from the reporting agents. I mean, you may have heard about the BIRD initiative, Banks Integrated Reporting Dictionary. This is an initiative the ECB has been sponsoring together with the banking industry to try to, on the two sides, try to understand what is required in the regulation and what are the transformation rules that will help you to deliver. And then, of course, the bank is free to use that or not. This is a voluntary tool, but tries to precisely help the industry in trying to exactly understand what the authorities are meaning by the one or the other template. And this is just only a very basic starting point. Then the authorities have to do another second step, which is go to semantics and try to see whether in my templates I'm using different concepts. Why? Cannot be disaligned. Then these transformations can be simple, more direct, because you don't have different interpretations. This is, I think, where we have to work a bit.
Yeah, and tell me a bit about then what that work is like for this year, because I think that helps set the agenda, right? So we talked about the JCRB recommendations. Obviously, those have to be taken onto the work plan. But what are you going to be doing anyway with regard to semantics as part of the IREF? And I probably owe the listeners a bit of an explanation about what IREF is all about.
Yes, I think here it's very important to keep a certain sequence in the work. And as you say, the JBRC was now issuing the work program. I mean, we published it yesterday. And basically, I guess to no surprise, I think the basic work or the big bulk of the activity for these years to continue working on the semantics. So we have an expert group on semantics that, as you rightly said, has issued already yesterday some recommendations to the authorities precisely about where they can do better in trying to use similar concepts or explain better the concepts so that we can have this alignment. And then also the work on data dictionary. The work on data dictionary is coming more because of, let's say, very much because of the banking industry has been asking to that work to start already, because it's been seen as also very crucial to work semantics and data dictionary more or less hand in hand. So we are going to look at whether we can start maybe a certain group looking already to data dictionaries in parallel to the semantics. I think this is important that we also govern these two elements centrally to avoid overlaps and precisely to come, if we ever can come, to this idea of the define one principle. So not having 300 definitions for hardly the same concept. This is an issue where we have to do better. And then based on this one data model for descriptive metadata, semantically integrate across of the frameworks, this is the way that we think we pave the way for then having a data model to work on that side, which will then be coming next. The idea of coming to the data modeling and lineage that will increase quality and try to improve the work. So those will be, I think, as was said also in the agenda or in the work program, the areas where we will try to speed up work or push more energy on that. And it's, of course, there are always questions about resources and so on, but this is what we are planning to now push for that. And on top of that, have what we call it, I think, in the work program, sort of the future direction for building blocks of an integrated reporting. So the idea there would be to create a sort of a vision note, which tell us what are the elements that we need to be looking at. Semantic would be one, data dictionary would be one, maybe granularity could be another one. These blocks that we need to be looking at and trying to sort out together with the industry to see whether we can have the idea of having an integrated single reporting of down the future. And last on my side, the governance is crucial here. The JBRC is absolutely necessary because, I mean, on banks reporting, we have different authorities with different legislative capacity, powers, and either the authorities sit together and agree that in order to have an integration, we have to talk and try to align us, or otherwise, of course, this will never be sorted out, because if every institution tries to use their own data model, their own data definitions, it's exactly what has brought us today here.
Yeah, thank you for spelling that out, Remy. I think that we did some fantastic work, and then I think the public authorities don't get enough recognition for just how hard this is. But we've seen from the CRR request for this integrated system. Gosh, what is that? 3-4 years ago now. Actually, more than that. Probably the early 20s that came out. Till now, it took that long just to get the structures in place and get all those agreements. Yeah. So we're in the good news is you've done all that hard work on the banking and prudential side. ESMA's doing some really hard lifting as well, and they got some good funding for it this year. So they've come out with their strategy saying, hey, we're going to do a capital markets reference model as well as part of all this. So all the elements seem there. Stephanie, from your point of view, what's the unlock here in light of all this that's going on? How do you get the wood behind the arrowhead and try to get to integrated reporting?
So from our side, and kind of what everything we've been talking about will lead to is really around having this data dictionary, having this semantics, having an understanding of the data you have upstream and how that needs to be translated into what the regulators want. So for those firms that have those global obligations, what are those fields that are common between all of the different regulations? What are they required? Obviously, we have the critical data elements under CDE, but we're in the global harmonization. There's definitely still some points of difference and different interpretation amongst the regulators. So it's understanding those minor nuances and how they fit into your data model. And from there as well, so once you have that common data dictionary, the semantics, you understand the meaning behind all of these fields, all of the metadata, what are the valid values, which regimes are they applicable to? You can then plug all of your upstream data into each one of those. And from there, you have a common way to represent how all of these transactions or all of these products are represented in all those various upstream systems, any other counterparty enrichments. You want to have that middle layer really ironed out. Whether you represent that internally or you leverage the CDM, which we've spoken about a little bit, the common domain model, which is the way into DRR, and whether or not you use those DRR, those standard transformations that have been agreed by the industry, or whether or not you apply your own transformations, you then start to build out this lineage that we've been talking about. So you have this big tree of understanding of how your data goes from all of these various upstream places into this middle layer and how that needs to be transformed to each one of those different regulatory requirements. And I think this is especially important as we continue on with these waves of change, and we might continue to see some more divergence between the UK and EU, especially for the call for evidence. If you have all of that really well documented and you understand where you can make those changes, it also means you don't have to change everything all over again. So if you nail down these data dictionaries, these semantics, and all that lineage, it makes implementing change hopefully much easier. There's the other side of that as well, where if you onboard new products, new asset classes, you want to upgrade your source systems. If you have all that lineage, it also helps to make sure that your reporting is still consistent, in line, on time, everything that those regulators require, and to the highest of standards. So I think it's really establishing, alongside what the regulators are doing now and what the ECB is doing, is establishing those data dictionary, the semantics, making sure that the granular detail is there. The regulators have come out with more and more information, more and more interpretation, more FAQs to really try and give the industry as much guidance as possible so that they can make sure that what they're reporting is correct. So it's really nailing down that middle layer from my perspective. And we see this a lot with our platform. And as I mentioned before, we're really, our ethos is really provide a glass box solution. So any of those transformations that we do for our clients into our middle layer, we provide that full transparency. So if we do identify any reconciliation issues, any assurance issues, it's very obvious for clients how we've looked at their data, how we've interpreted it, how we've transformed it. They can go compare that to what they've done and hopefully have that well-documented system in place as well.
And the one thing I'd like to ask you both about in this context is something no one's mentioned yet, which is quality levels. And ultimately, glass boxes and connecting to models is all great, but don't we have a bigger challenge here, which is the quality levels just aren't really good enough today, and we need to think about the way we're dealing with quality differently. Now, Stephanie, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. And that's one of our key offerings is around the quality of your data. So is your schema valid? Fantastic. But is the quality of the data there? Do you apply those industry best practices? Do you apply that? We still see firms that are not reporting optional fields because they don't want to, but that's not the highest level of quality. Like if you have that information, you should provide it. If you don't have it, you should see how you should get that. If you find out that there is something wrong with an optional field you haven't been reporting, maybe that has another layered on effect or another downstream effect if something else is wrong somewhere else. So you want to make sure you're getting all of that data, you're well documenting it. All of your regulatory interpretation is aligned with each one of those transformations. Are you validating against golden source? Are you using validating everything against Glyph? How often do you look at those external registers? The majority of the regulators publish any registers that they have around what entities are classified different classifications. Are you validating your counterparty static's up to date? There's many different ways that firms can ensure that their data quality is up to scratch. Obviously, a plug for Novatus, right? You can use third-party vendors like ours to make sure that you have that quality assurance in place. But there's definitely many ways that firms should look to do that. And I think especially now as well, just touching on the fact that we will start to see the additional reconcilable fields come into play under EMIR this year. It's really important to have that data quality there so you can get ahead of any potential reconciliation issues that you might see with your counterparties.
And Remy, with my research last year with a number of the central banks for the statistical conference in November, there was a lot of discussion around validation and having to use Python scripts to look at the data, come in, cross-correlate other things. I mean, that's when you talk about simplification, coming up with common validation rules would be a good place to start.
Maybe in the area of quality and validation rules and Python scripts to check whatever quality or even artificial intelligence, I think the important thing is the quality of the data is as much good as it can from the start. And then you have much less problems. I mean, the amount of work we are spending here at the ECB in checking quality, in contacting banks, resubmissions, re-emissions. I mean, this is really huge. And also you can observe it really varies very much across jurisdictions, across institutions. Of course, we are convinced that moving from the template-based reporting to this more logical data model reporting will help us through the data lineage and so on, improve the quality. So it's not only that we will have a much broader granular information that we can more flexibly use, but that the information will be of more quality. On that, I think it's also important to interact more together, authorities and banks. Give you an example. One of the biggest elements in our loan-by-loan reporting is the counterparty information. There is where we spend enormous amount of data trying to understand whether the loan given to this company, which is referred as to X in that report, is exactly the same if we then want to aggregate what is the total exposures of the banking system to a given company, just to give you an example. This, of course, is enormously costly to check, to match, to whatever. It would be very much easier, for example, if we can do things like we have our own counterparty repository, if we could share it with the industry so that the industry has it when reporting, so that then they can match the code, and then what we get is already perfectly matched with the thing. So those are the things, but that requires sharing information, requires much more going to the idea of logical data model, that reporting granular elements have attributes or fields that are common into the two camps, so that facilitates the reporting. And then you have not only a simple reporting, but also a more high quality reporting. These are certainly the areas where we also have to be looking at when we move into that direction.
Yeah, that's I think an excellent place to wrap it up. I guess from my perspective, this is spot on with where the industry is. We're looking at how do you document the assumptions around the code and make those more transparent. Is a whole initiative around actually getting that traceability out there. But we need more of that, and we need to tie it to the regulatory text. It's no good locking it up in a data model if they can't prove the lineage of how you came up with that interpretation, right? So we need these open standards. We need to have the lineage back to the text, and people need to be able to ingest that into their framework. So when you get to validation, you know why you said it was good. And I think that's it's a fairly simple truth that I've come to now looking at this for this year. That's the number one priority in my mind. But in closing, could I please ask Remy, you kick off. Well, what's the 60-second takeaway from this discussion for you? What really matters this year? Why should people be paying attention to this conversation? And secondly, what's going to happen on the 26th of March at our RegTech conference here in London, and why should people be there?
I mean, I think we are now having, I would say, a one unique opportunity moment to give a push to this, I think, idea for the next century in the way of reporting has been working for centuries, which is moving from this template-based reporting to more data model, data lineage-based reporting. I'm saying this, we have a unique opportunity at the moment because there has been a certain momentum now. We are having the political will to move into that direction through the simplification agenda. We want to make, the Commission also wants to make the EU banks more competitive, and that requires that we should also look at reporting to make it more slim, but not to lose also information, because also we do not want to have another crisis or a bank falling apart or whatever. So we have to square the circle or strike the right balance, and this is only possible to look at the what. The authorities must define what's the what to be reported, but the how we have to work out together with the industry. And this how cannot be based on this complex regulation issued by different institutions that are different to interpret, difficult to translate. There we have to move into a complete new world of more digital, logical data model reporting, more granular, closer to the bank's language, and we have to help out this process. So I would definitively invite everybody that is interested in this future of reporting to come to the industry. It's really the right moment.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, sure. I feel like, PJ, you wrapped it up pretty nicely in terms of what we've spoke about, and really this focus on data quality. And, that is what the heart of what we do is ensuring that what's reported is accurate, complete, and timely. And, you really cannot do that without proper data quality, without proper data lineage, proper controls. And, I think Remy and I both share the same point around making sure all of your reference data is correct. And it's not just around what's in your booking systems, but how are you validating everything else outside of that? How are you making sure that, you're abiding to the letter of the law, but is it what the regulators are looking for? Is your interpretation correct? Are you having these engaging discussions? And I think that's also one of the key reasons about why people should come to these conferences, is to hear what everybody's doing, hear what the regulators want, hear the different opinions, understand the common challenges that people are having, and how do you make more noise and ask for more interpretation where there are common challenges. If you're an outlier in a certain area, why are you an outlier in that area? Maybe you want to understand and have these dialogues in person with all of the people that will be attending the amazing conference. But I think really the focus is around data quality, interpretation, data dictionaries, really having all of the semantics and the metadata associated with why you are reporting what you're reporting. So very much looking forward to the in-person session, and really thankful to be part of the podcast today.
Well, thank you both. And I guess just to wrap this up, the key thing we have to also keep in mind is there's a huge risk here. If there is global divergence, if the UK goes a different way from Europe, which goes a different way from the US, this gets infinitely harder, and that once in a century opportunity that Remy talked about is gone. So if we're not together, and as Stephanie rightly says, we have a great cast of characters. I encourage everybody to come. We have all kinds of perspectives, European, UK, global. What is going to make this transition, simpler, faster, and safer for you, as well as getting the cost down. So lots of reasons to come to the conference. In terms of this season 7 for Regcast, it's all about fixing the translation layer before it hardens. We'll have a number of other podcasts coming out before the conference, but that's where it comes all together. So stay tuned and track us as well as our RegTech Edge for detailed analysis on all these topics. We'll put some links in the show notes. But if you want to stay ahead of where those expectations are going, make sure that you follow us along. And thanks for listening. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Regcast, delivering regulatory clarity, AI precision, and market trust. Please subscribe and share. It helps more people join this vital conversation. Find all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or at regrissolutions.com.